when she was here invading my space, I was like, future Mia doesn't care.
You are listening to Relationship Renegade Weekend Edition, the show that brings you hard truths and realities about relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Jameson Mercier, licensed clinical social worker and doctor of marriage and family therapy. And this weekend, like all weekends, I got my co-host, Mia, with me. How are you, Mia?
I'm good. I'm here, ready to roll.
Yes. Yes, you
It's always
are.
something.
Yes, you are. So today we're talking about something that's got just about everyone's lives all kinds of jacked up right now.
Yes, all jumbled up.
For real. And so emotionally and in many cases, literally, right? We're talking about this thing called COVID/coronavirus. We've addressed
dun.
I know we've addressed coronavirus before on the show, but it's still here, and it's almost like an evolving situation. So we decided to address it again. There's more that needs to be said, and so that's what this show's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, it's becoming something that's longer than anticipated. And I think that that in itself was grounds for some talking.
Yeah, when we find ourselves in some uncertain times, we can deal with the uncertainties for maybe a couple weeks, a few weeks, even a couple months in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
That's if we know that. No?
Right. I don't know if you've seen this lately, but there's been some memes rolling around on the internet that's been trending that are showing like, stars or whatever in like March through now, and they have like different faces of despair. I don't know if you've seen that, like just growing despair as the months go on. So, people are trying to make it funny, but ultimately I think it's reflecting how some people are really feeling.
Yeah. I can imagine. It gets to where it's a bit of a draw. It's draining, And so what we're going to address in these next few minutes are different coping strategies for a couple situations. Because we can be stuck in our despair, or we can, seek ways to manage it, because and I'll just be frank, it seems to be something that's going to be with us for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. And how can we find the little, moments of that silver lining?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's jump into this, right? So as a result of COVID, lots of things have changed for millions of people. All right. And we're talking about little simple, mundane things to literally people losing loved ones. And that's just heartbreaking. But we're going to talk, we seem to be talking today, focusing on the space aspect. I have a friend of mine. She has a really awesome podcast. Her name is Patrice Washington. She has what's called a space pillar. Her podcast is Redefining Wealth. If anyone's interested, with Patrice Washington, let her know that Jameson Mercier sent you. But one of the dimensions of being okay, being well, she talks about your space pillar. And for a lot of people, their space pillar either no longer exists, or it has been radically remodeled, renovated, if we can use those words.
That's nice.
So if you are someone in that situation currently where your space has changed, and there's a number of ways in
Mm-hmm.
which it can change, this episode's for you. And if you know someone whose space has changed, do them a favor and send them this podcast, and tell them to keep hope alive.
We're with you.
Yeah. So, first thing we want to talk about, there are some people who find themselves having to move in with others, right? Whether it's friends or families, um, co-workers even, I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
that can be very disruptive to your life. Any thoughts on that, Mia?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a personal experience with that. And if I may share, um, I had my mom was living with me, and she, with conversations, we had to have some candid conversations. Um, she had lost her job because of COVID, and she found herself living with me. And I went through my own things, which we can talk about. But for her, when I did talk to her about it, she felt like um, she was burdensome, that she was trying really hard to stay out of my way. And um, just that kind of coupled with like not really knowing when she was going to be able to have a job again, or just the simple things of like unemployment, um, what is it called, the unemployment websites just shutting down and things like that here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
um, just all of that. So she kind of felt like she was on eggshells when she was living here. And that kind of put a little bit of stress on our relationship, because I wanted to be like, okay, well, don't worry about it, like, you're living here now, like, let's make this our space kind of thing. But for her, it was something that she didn't want to have to do. I was her daughter, so there was, that. But
Mm-hmm.
she just more or less didn't want to feel like she was invading my space. She was kind of stayed to her little corner. And I think there's a lot of people that are in that situation that feel like, the same way. Like they don't want to impede too much on the person they're staying with space. They're very aware that they're in someone else's space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, Emotionally, too, because there's a lot of uncertainty going on, like the loud chaos of that around them, for the person that they're living with, but also for them.
Yeah. And one way, well, let me back up a bit. I think if you're the person who is allowing someone to live with you, you can easily forget what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're being generous and you're like, no, it's fine. Just, whether you say take as long as you need, or my house is your house, it doesn't change what the other individual is going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how you said it. She didn't want to be a burden. Not that you are making her feel like she was a burden. She just, I mean, imagine people have been grown for years. They're accustomed to taking care of themselves. And now
Mm-hmm.
they're suddenly being thrust into a situation that is not their fault. It really is not anyone's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who do you blame for that? So that just kind of creates just a lot of stuff that needs to be dealt with. And yet you are still in, like we said, in this uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Where will you be living from, next month, or where will you be working? So,
It exactly, like you can't even give the person you're staying with like a deadline. Like I'll be out in 3 months, or I'm in between jobs or something, because it's just so uncertain. You don't really, for the longest time, we didn't know.
mhm. And to some extent, we still don't know,
Absolutely.
you
Hmm.
know? And so, no matter how comfortable you try to make someone feel,
Mhm.
it can just, that discomfort just kind of comes with the disruptions that we're all feeling now.
Right. Absolutely. And then I know on my end of like kind of hosting somebody that was um, kind of down and out, like, it can feel a little intense sometimes because you also the energy of your space changes, the dynamic kind of changes a little bit. You have somebody who, you might be used to being fun and bubbly and, whatever. And then you have them in this space and time, and really, this happened relatively quickly. So there's no like preparation or anything. It was just kind of like, nope, close up shop. So you have somebody that, whole emotional state changes,
Mhm.
um, which you're not really prepared for sometimes, I guess, when you're inviting them to stay with you. Um, so you have that too. And you're absolutely right. You said it before where, um, I was like, oh, stay as long as you want, stay as long as you need. And then, close to a few, 6 months, you're like, all right,
Yeah, this is
okay,
getting tired.
this is getting, oh, this is tight now. The things that used to be kind of like fun and engaging about this person is like freaking annoying. You're like, oh God, if I have to hear one more thing or listen to their show, like I'm gonna rage. Um, so you definitely do forget sometimes like what they're going through as well, because then you're, at least for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like when am I going to get my space back, like
Hmm.
trying to control things, and because I felt out of control. And then it can just kind of create a little discomfort for both people.
Oh yeah. And so, let's kind of linger there for a little bit. I know, um, when I have guests who come and stay with me, and here's a crazy thing, right? Whether it is for like an evening or a weekend or a week,
Hmm.
there is a point where you do begin to feel like, oh man, now I can't do this, right? If someone's sleeping on your couch and on Friday nights, your routine was to lay on your couch and watch Netflix. Yeah, you can go to
Hmm.
your bedroom or you can go wherever, but now that moment, that space, that activity is gone.
It's closed off. You're kind of like, yeah, like that's off limits now, your
Right.
space.
It's
Hmm.
and are you gonna be like, do you mind going somewhere else or to the kitchen or
Hmm.
you, that now there's that, what do you do in that? Do you just go without or do you say something? And wow.
I mean, I had gone without.
Yeah. But see, you can only go without for so long.
Hi, we are the Mercier kids. Like what you hear so far?
Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe now.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
It's true. And we'll talk about it in a little while, but that was one of the things that, you reach a breaking point, I feel like, and then everything just comes out. And
Mm,
so everything you've kind of been holding on to with this person, that you didn't really have to deal with because you could just kind of be distantly together, um, via social media. Like you can kind of shut them off when you want to shut them off, and you can cut the phone call short when you want to cut the phone call short. But now you're like literally in the space. And so you get to a point where you can't just click off, like, or
mm-mm.
hang up. Like you actually have to have those conversations with these people, and actually be vulnerable and let people know how you feel.
Yeah. I'll tell you, years ago, I was living with my mom, when
Mhm.
we moved back down to South Florida, and we I'm telling you, yeah, growing up with your parents, yeah, there's some issues. I mean, hell, that's why you move away, to get away from those issues. That's why we go to college, right? Thank God for college. college has saved a lot of parental and familial relationships, trust me. But it's clear that if the relationship is going to be maintained, that you have to address the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, and I think we had. I think there's an episode where we talk about like having these hard conversations, and that's the thing that keeps us from these meaningful relationships.
Mm-hmm.
COVID has really forced some conversations because just circumstances have changed. We can no longer run from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Even just in like spouse relationships, or the people that you're dating, I've seen people's relationships have gotten more serious, or they've disintegrated.
Mm.
Because people are just not having those hard conversations, or they are, and it's allowed the relationship to flourish, or they haven't, and I feel like it's caused a little bit of resentment or some friction. But ultimately, COVID has presented an opportunity where people are having to adjust, not just like with the uncertainty, but also just the emotional component of it, which is like we said before, like you're face to face with these people, you can't click off, like you have to deal with some of these emotions that are coming up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so we're talking about coping with some of these uncertainties,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're talking about the emotions that come up. Now, is really the only way to cope to talk about it? Are there any other coping skills or strategies or tips um, to be implemented?
Well, in my personal opinion, I think there's been times like through this COVID experience where I've had to reconnect with myself. And what does that look like? Because, things have slowed down quite a bit. And, oftentimes you're left with yourself for longer periods of time without the normal distractions of our day-to-day life that we typically have. And so, that buzzword of self-care kind of comes to mind off the bat. And what does that mean? Because some of the typical self-care things that you see people resort to, like massages or like spa days, weren't really available.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So in my experience, it was like reconnecting to the things that I really enjoyed, which were things that I kind of hadn't really thought about, as weird as that sounds, in a really long time. Things like painting, or going outside for like walks with my mom, or, doing things more together, but they were activities versus just individual things.
Mm-hmm.
So there was opportunities to be a little bit more creative with how I was going to handle some of those big emotions. And I'm not going to lie, at first it was definitely difficult, but when I was able to kind of reconcile that this was the reality, that was really helpful.
Yeah, no, good. It's great. I've said before, and I guess similar to what you're saying in terms of coping. Um, so I started a new job in February, and that job,
Mm-hmm.
it had about a 45-minute to an hour commute,
Mm-hmm.
and that that was something I thought I was going to dread, right? But as it turns out, I actually enjoyed that commute. I got so much reading done, and I kind of built a routine, and we would get on the bus, and like there was just something that developed, and it happened pretty quick. And then
Mm-hmm.
a month into it, that got taken away from me because COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it didn't really hit me until I started working from home, because now I no longer had the transition time between work, right?
Right.
So that's something that's also happening when you have people, or if you're hosting someone. I like when you use that word, if you're hosting someone, or if you are being hosted,
Mm-hmm.
right? You lose your routine around work, or just you lose all routine. So
Right.
now, not only have I lost that, but my kids are home, and it no longer feels like it's like my job, right? It's like a job in the house. So it's almost like the house's job, if that makes any sense for anybody who's working from
It
home.
does.
It used to be like your
Uh-huh.
getaway time, your special place. You had your
Mm-hmm.
special friends, and I no longer have my special friends, and we no longer go out to lunch on Thursdays, and we don't go to the market on every other Tuesday when it shows up. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, wow. And so it happens to many people. It's happening to everybody, I want to say, whether
Yeah.
you're in uncertain due to either losing your job or your home, or if you've maintained your job, maintained your income,
Mm-hmm.
but you've lost a routine.
Right. Huh. Well, what do you think are some of the benefits, if you would, if you will, of having to recreate this quote unquote new normal?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I'll definitely tell you, it's made me, and I've heard from other people, it's made them more appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is how it goes, right? You have something, you take it for granted, you lose it, then you really love it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You reconnect with it. And so the times that I have been able to connect with people digitally, because that's what we have now,
Right.
I am relishing those moments. I almost don't want them to end. My
Yeah.
brother lives in Maryland, and we took a road trip to go see him, and then my new niece hung out with him and
Mm-hmm.
wife. And then, but when we talk on the phone now, and my brother and I, we could always talk, but like, I genuinely enjoy connecting with my brother when we talk. And then we have some digital meetups, some Zoom calls with some of my cousins. We have one in Seattle, another one in California, and we get together every other week on Saturday nights, and we just talk and have a drink and catch up. And I find myself looking forward to those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even just I found too, like, and when I was working, I'd have to wake up so early in the morning at like 5:30. Now with having, Zoom starting at 8 o'clock, I have so much time to do like a slow morning, which there's something really great about waking up slow. I feel like you're not jumping out of bed, and just getting, hitting fast forward,
Mm-hmm.
those, like you're saying, like just kind of relishing in those like small things that like you said, you would take for granted. And also for me, like becoming a little bit more creative, like working on the kind of the side hustles that like I thought about doing or never really thought I had time to do. I kind of have a little bit more time to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and explore more of those interests that I really actually really like.
Nice.
I know you've
Nice.
been traveling too.
Yeah. Now, see, when we say travel, people are like, oh my God, traveling during COVID. It's
Yeah,
traveling, but
sorry.
in in my own. It's traveling in my own like spaceship, if you will. Right? We're talking about in my truck,
Mhm.
because
Nice.
I'm not quite ready to get on the plane yet. But
Mhm.
traveling and really doing a lot more outdoor stuff, which
Mhm.
I was really into the outdoors before, but now I'm really appreciative of it because that is one aspect in my life, at least, that's not changed for the worse, you know? And so if
Right.
we're talking about space, while I've lost some control of like the space in my house and that dynamic, um,
Mhm.
I run outside. I go outside and then I sit in that space. You know, as we're having this conversation, I'm actually preparing for a hike um in the month of
Ooh,
in the month of October,
nice.
a week-long hike on the Appalachian Trail.
How fun is that?
Oh, I'm going to find out.
Awesome.
I'm going to find out soon enough.
Find out, report back. Um, but also too, like you're saying, like the proximity and like the physical space. But I found for me, like the emotional space, um, that I like said before, I had otherwise just kind of closed off. Like if I didn't want to deal with someone or something, I could just click off. But having
Mhm.
somebody here, um, and the ability to really work on a relationship or better my relationship with whoever it is, that with, my mom who's staying with me, I think at it, and like I'm not going to have too much of that time again,
Mhm.
where my mom is now in Texas with my dad, and so having her with me for a year is something that I'm sure future Mia will be very happy
Mhm.
um, to have had that time with my mom and to be able to share space with her so closely.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think about while I complain about losing some of my autonomy in my
Mm-hmm.
time away from my kids, from the wife, there is a part of me that's grateful for having it,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, we've been together for a long time, but we've never been together for this uninterrupted time,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so, like you said earlier, it makes or breaks a relationship. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and, I'm definitely appreciative for it. And for people in that situation, yeah, that's something they can also turn to as a positive. It's not easy. I'll be the first to tell you.
Mm-mm.
It is not.
I'll be the second to tell you. When she was here invading my space, I was like, future Mia doesn't care.
It is not without its challenges, you know.
Yeah.
And we're talking about
Uh-huh.
little stuff, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
they don't wash the coffee mug, or they use your favorite mug,
Right.
your Monday morning mug.
Or they broke something.
Yeah.
Yeah. They broke something, they clogged something, and
Yeah,
then an opportune time. You're like, ah.
I know. But those things are in the grand scheme of things, they are minor.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's the message, I guess, to be taken away, is that it yes, there are uncertain times, um, but the things that create the uncertainties and the anxieties at times, relative to what's happening in the world, they're minor. They're minor. And this isn't me
Mm-hmm.
trying to preach to you or anybody else, but we recognize that things could be way worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people often look to
Absolutely.
that as a way to say, oh, they could always be worse. But, you know, I like to be in the mindset of just appreciating what I can, because yeah, I may not have it.
It's true. Very
So,
true.
yeah. So we'd like to hear from you if you're hosting or being hosted, what that whole experience is like. And you don't necessarily have to be, say, hosting someone new, because it almost feels like I'm hosting my kids and my wife sometimes, because ordinarily they shouldn't be in the house at 1:00 in the afternoon.
That's very true.
You know what I mean? So whatever your situation is, we'd like to hear what that experience is like. You know how to get in touch with us. You know, what is it? The social medias out there. Leave a review. Leave a review. Please leave a review, or just a comment in the review section. I don't know. Thank you for those of you who've been sharing the metrics. I got to update you on the metrics. They are looking good, looking better than good.
Ooh, I like to hear that. Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah. Well, that's our show, guys. Thank you for joining us for this weekend edition of Relationship Renegade. Thank you. I invite you to come back for another installment next Saturday, but also Wednesday, catching the regular Wednesday installments. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.